Why can we be confident that Bible principles for husbands and wives work? Because they've worked for Jehovah's people in the past. In the following dramatization, notice what wives and husbands can learn from the example of Sarah.
Pioneering where the need is greater wasn't easy. After a long day in service, I had a part to work on. Thankfully, Jess took care of everything so I could focus on my part. She's the best. Poor thing. She was exhausted. Good thing we were turning in early.
William and I couldn't agree on much lately. We couldn't afford this. There had to be something cheaper. But he wouldn't listen. Sometimes, I feel my husband doesn't make the best decisions. I just wish he'd value my suggestions. Frankly, I've given up trying.
So we're now watching a dramatization highlighting the Bible character Sarah, as in Abraham and Sarah. We start off with this young couple pioneering where the need is greater, and he's obviously very preoccupied with his role in the congregation. It's again portraying a very stereotyped view of what a marriage should be, isn't it? Showing him focused on his congregation duties while the wife loyally slaves in the kitchen to make the meal. Oh, Jess, she's the best for making this meal just so I can sit there at the table doing my meeting preparation. Incidentally, it's not really condemned for him to do this as we go on and see the rest of this dramatization. It turns out he needs to be more mindful of Jess's needs by taking her to the restaurant occasionally. But apparently there's nothing wrong in him doing essentially what he was doing his meeting preparation at the dining table with his wife sat across from him, having prepared this meal, which is apparently her job. It's her role, isn't it? We're learning all about roles in this JW Broadcasting episode and how apparently all the crummy roles fall to the woman. And then you have this couple where the guy is looking at expensive cameras. I should say the guy's name is William. William's looking at expensive cameras, and his wife is exasperated because she is clearly pointing out that they can't afford the camera that he's buying, and he won't listen to her. That's the problem they have in that particular marriage. It's not that she has any issue speaking out when she needs to say something. It's that her husband won't listen. But as the dramatization continues, we're going to find that actually it's not William's fault. It's not the husband's fault for being apparently inept at handling the household finances. It's her fault for not being assertive enough.
Sarah was willing to move to parts unknown. a life fraught with danger and hardship. She unselfishly supported Abraham, no matter what. Just like my Jessica. She does without, never complains. What a gem. I can do better, letting her know just how precious she is to me.
Sarah submissively obeyed her husband. But she also spoke up. She loved her son, and she knew what was at stake. God's promises through Isaac. Even though she knew it would upset Abraham, she spoke up. She must have thought carefully before speaking to him. After all, she called him Lord. Jehovah blessed her for her loyal support of Abraham, even reminding him to listen to her. I knew I couldn't expect Jehovah to whisper in my husband's ear. But did my speech show respect, like Sarah? I needed to tell him how I felt, but I needed to do it the right way.
Yes, it's all her fault, apparently. She was right about the camera. She was right to remind her husband that they couldn't afford that particular piece of tech and that they needed to be more careful with their finances. She just wasn't respectful enough. She just wasn't as subservient as she ought to be, because after all, when Sarah was talking to Abraham, Sarah called Abraham Lord. That's the sort of language that's expected of you if you're a Jehovah's Witness wife. You need to imitate Sarah. Kind of kinky, isn't it? You need to imitate Sarah and call your husband Lord, or otherwise show your respect for your husband. You can't just state your mind plainly. Everything has to be laced with this heavy appreciation for his role in the marriage and acknowledgement of your subservient role. That's the message I took from that part of the dramatization. They seem to be basing it, by the way, on Genesis 21. There's a story in Genesis 21 where Sarah gives birth to Isaac, and then there's tension between Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael was the son of Hagar and Abraham. It was totally messed up, viewers. Jehovah's Witnesses who are watching this might be vaguely familiar with the story. It's another example of how the morals in the Bible simply don't square up with the morals that are frankly expected of Jehovah's Witnesses today. But there came a point in Genesis earlier on where Sarah basically told her husband to have sex with her maidservant, Hagar, because she wasn't able to bear a child. The solution was, well, you have sex with my maidservant Hagar, that way there will at least be progeny for you, because I'm failing in my wifely duties when it comes to childbearing. At least this way you will have a son. Abraham takes Sarah's advice and practices polygamy, which apparently is okay under certain circumstances. Inevitably, a child comes on the scene, Ishmael. But when Sarah eventually has a child of her own, Isaac, also inevitably there's friction between Sarah and Hagar, and Sarah takes an extremely dim view of both Hagar and Ishmael. Isaac and Ishmael have fallings out. It says in Genesis 21 verse 9, but Sarah kept noticing that the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, was mocking Isaac. Oh dear, not mocking Isaac. How awful. That's in fact unforgivable. If Ishmael is mocking Isaac, what needs to happen, quite frankly, viewers, is Abraham needs to disfellowship Hagar, his second wife, or however many wives it was, his wife and his child Ishmael. He needs to disfellowship them from the family and basically send them packing on Sarah's instructions. And that's what happens. And that's the story that's alluded to here. It's interesting that they don't spell the story out. They just give you this vague depiction of it without you really knowing what's happening. But when you read Genesis 21, I'm sorry, viewers, this is a messed up story and not something that should be pointed to in the 21st century as a model of how families ought to conduct themselves. On the other side of the dramatization, of course, you have the couple of pioneers who are serving where the need is great. He had previously been lacking in appreciation for Jess, who had been performing her wifely role of loyally being in subjection and preparing meals for her husband, only for her husband to sit at the table and be more interested in preparing his talk. Because, of course, kingdom interests always come first. As we're going to see later on in this JW Broadcasting episode, Jehovah comes first in the marriage. So that sort of behavior is actually quite excusable. But it's interesting that he says regarding Jess, his wife,
she does without, never complains. What a gem.
Well, there's the take-home message for Jehovah's Witness wives. If you're in a marriage and you happen to be female, you need to bear in mind that you should never complain. You should just go about your wifely duties and make sure that you live up to your husband's expectations.